Wyoming Territory, July 3, 1882. The church bell had stopped ringing, but the echo of it clung to the air like dust, heavy and still. On the worn stone steps of the whitewashed chapel in the heart of Laramie, a young woman in a wedding dress sat with her face buried in her hands, the lace veil trembling around her shoulders. Her name was Clara Prescott, and she had just been left behind at the altar. The guests were gone. The preacher had quietly stepped back inside. Only the summer wind remained, tugging at her skirt, lifting her curls from her neck like it was trying to comfort her. A horse clopped to a slow halt on the road. Boots hit the dirt. "Ma'am," a man's voice said, low and unsure. Clara looked up. The man standing before her was tall, dusty from the trail, and not the sort who looked like he belonged near a church. Brown hair curled from under a weathered hat, and his eyes soft, steady, and warm met hers without flinching. He held the reins of a chestnut gelding, and a bedroll was tied behind his saddle. She blinked at him, dazed. "Do I know you?" "No, ma'am. Just passing through." He glanced toward the chapel door, then back to her. "But I could not ride on seeing you cry like that." Clara wiped her eyes with the heel of her palm. Her cheeks were blotchy, her hands shaking. "You should keep riding. Nothing worth stopping for here." "I do not believe that," he said gently. "Name's Jonah Avery." She hesitated, then offered Clara Prescott. His gaze dropped to the bouquet lying beside her, wilted from the sun. "Did he not show?" Clara let out a breath that was more a sob. "He changed his mind this morning. Sent his brother to tell me. Said marrying me would tie him down. Said he needed to go find himself in California. After 2 years together." Jonah's jaw tightened. "That is a damn poor thing to do to a woman." "I thought we loved each other," she whispered. He stepped closer, slow and careful, like approaching a wounded animal. "Seems to me if a man runs from a woman like you, he never knew what love was." Clara stared at him. "Why are you being kind?" "Because you deserve it." A silence stretched between them. Then, with a dry laugh, Clara stood, brushing her skirt. "Well, now that I have made a scene in front of half the town, I suppose I should go home and figure out what to do with the rest of my life." Jonah looked at her straight. "What if I gave you an answer to that?" She frowned. "What do you mean?" "I know we just met, and you do not know a thing about me, but I am a good man. I work hard. I have land near Medicine Bow, 60 acres, and a cabin I built with my own hands. I was headed back there now." He paused. "If you want a new start, I could give you one. If you want a husband who would never leave you standing alone, I could be him." Clara stared at him, stunned. "You are serious?" "I am. You do not know me." "I know enough. You kept that dress on even after your heart broke. That tells me you were strong." Her lips parted, but no words came. Jonah looked down for a moment. "I lost my ma young. Raised my little sister till she married. I do not like seeing a woman left alone. And I do not like wasting time when something good is right in front of me." Clara's voice was soft. "Are you saying I am something good?" "I am saying you might be the best thing that ever crossed my path." She pressed her hand to her chest. "This is crazy. Maybe. But sometimes life turns on a dime. And sometimes a man just knows." Clara looked around the empty street, the quiet church, the bouquet at her feet. Everything that had once been certain felt gone. And yet here was this stranger offering something solid, something kind. I do not even know where to begin," she said. He held out his hand. "Start by coming with me." She stared at that hand, rough from work, steady in the sunlight. Then she took it. They rode out of Laramie an hour later. Jonah perched tall in the saddle, Clara behind him with her arms around his waist, veil tucked into her satchel, dress pinned up for the trail. The sun was setting behind them, casting long shadows across the plains. She leaned her cheek against his back, and for the first time that day her breathing slowed. They camped that night under open sky, near a creek that sparkled with moonlight. Jonah built a fire while Clara folded her dress into a blanket and sat with her knees pulled close. "You sure this is not a mistake?" she asked, watching the flames dance in his eyes. He handed her a tin cup of coffee. "You feel like a mistake?" "No," she said after a moment. You feel like the first right thing in a long time. He smiled small, real. They sat quiet after that, the fire crackling between them, the stars wheeling above. When Jonah lay down on his bedroll, Clara curled up beside him without a word, her hand finding his in the dark. He squeezed it gently, and she held on. In the morning, they would ride toward a new life, toward 60 acres, a cabin, and a second chance at everything she thought she had lost. But tonight, she slept beside a man who had stopped for her when no one else did, and she did not feel jilted anymore. The trail narrowed through a stretch of low pines, the kind that whistled when the wind caught them just right. Jonah led the way, reins loose in his hand, scanning the slope ahead while Clara rode behind on his pack mule, her skirts gathered beneath her to keep from tangling in the gear. The morning sun threaded through the trees, dappling her face with gold. "Does anyone else live near your place?" she asked, adjusting the borrowed hat he'd given her to keep the sun off. He didn't glance back, but she saw his shoulders shift slightly. "Closest neighbors the Bensons for miles west. Older couple. Keep chickens and a milk cow mostly. Nearest town is Medicine Bow, small but steady." "Is there a school?" He nodded once. "One room. Teacher comes up from Rollins in the winter, stays through spring." "Why?" "I used to think I'd teach if I didn't marry. I like books." "Children, too. You still could," he said. "I'm not sure the school board would welcome a woman who ran off with a stranger." He slowed his horse until they were level. "You didn't run. You chose something else." She looked at him, quiet. "Then, what's your land like?" He rubbed the back of his neck. "South-facing slope. Creek runs through the lower pasture. Pines up high, cottonwoods near the water. Good soil. Cabin's small, 2 rooms, but strong." "Did you build it alone?" "I did. Took 3 summers. Hauled the stone from the ridge myself." Timber came from the gulch on the east side. She watched him a long moment. "You sound proud." "I am. It was the first thing I ever made that stayed standing." They passed a fallen tree, its roots torn up like a hand reaching from the earth. A kestrel burst from its hollow trunk, wings flashing. "Do you want children?" she asked. He hesitated, then said, "If I had a wife strong enough to raise em right. And if she wanted them too." "I do," she said softly. "Someday." They didn't speak for a while after that. Just the creak of leather, the horse's hooves, the wind threading through pine needles above. Later, they stopped beneath a granite outcrop where the creek widened into a still pool. Jonah unsaddled the horses with practiced hands, every movement sure and quiet. Clara removed her boots and waded in, the cold water numbing her toes. "You fish?" he asked, lighting a small fire on the bank. "My father taught me," she said, lifting her hem as she stepped deeper. "Said a girl ought to know how to feed herself." Jonah tied a line to a branch and cast it out. "He sounds like a good man." He was. "Died of yellow fever when I was 14. He said nothing, just handed her a strip of dried venison from his pack. They ate in silence. Not the kind that weighs heavy, but the kind that lets the world breathe around you. After the sun dipped behind the ridge, Clara helped him roll out their bedding. He laid his blanket near the fire, she made her own a few feet away beneath a cottonwood. The air cooled fast once the light went. "I don't expect anything from you," he said, stretching out with his hat over his eyes. "You're free to choose your pace." She turned her face toward the stars. "You haven't asked me a single thing about what happened before. I figured you'd tell me when you were ready." "I don't think I will," she said. "Not because I can't. I'd rather not give it any more space in my life." He nodded once, slow, like he understood more than he let on. The fire popped, and the wind carried the scent of river rock and pine sap. "I like the way you speak," she said after a while. He lifted his hat enough to look at her. "How's that? Like everything you say has already been weighed." He gave a small smile just for a second. "And I like the way you listen." She turned onto her side, drawing her blanket tighter. "I think I'm going to be all right." "I know you are," he said. They didn't say anything else. By morning, the fire had burned down to coals. The horses were grazing by the water, and Clara woke with the sound of Jonah singing low under his breath as he boiled coffee over the embers. She didn't recognize the tune, but the sound of it made her chest ache in a way that had nothing to do with sorrow. She sat up, hair tousled, face pale in the early light. He handed her a tin cup. "Hope you like it strong." She took it, their fingers brushing. "I like it honest." He looked at her then, steady and quiet. "I can promise that," he said. "Every day you'll have it." By the fourth day on the trail, the mountains had softened into long, rolling hills, and Jonah's land came into view in the late light 60 acres hemmed by a split-rail fence, with the cabin tucked low beside a stand of cottonwoods. A curl of smoke rose from the stone chimney, faint but steady. "Looks like the roof held through spring," Jonah said, easing his horse to a stop at the ridge. Clara studied the land in silence. A line of apple trees flanked the path to the house, young and thin-limbed, their leaves trembling in the breeze. A windmill stood beyond them, turning slow and lazy above a shallow well. It was not grand, but it was whole. Lived in. Earned. Jonah dismounted, then offered her his hand. She took it without hesitation, her boots hitting the ground with a soft thud. "Smells like pine and wood ash," she said. "And something else. Juniper. Grows thick along the northern edge. I use it for kindling." They walked the last stretch side by side, their steps quiet on the packed dirt. A dog trotted around from behind the cabin, a lanky shepherd mix with one white paw and a crooked ear. It barked once but didn't growl. "That's Cooper," Jonah said. "He won't bother you. Just likes to know who's coming and going." Clara crouched, hand outstretched. Cooper sniffed her fingers, then leaned into her touch. "He's a good judge of character," Jonah said. Inside, the cabin smelled of cedar and lamp oil. A braided rug stretched across the plank floor, and on one wall hung a simple set of shelves filled with tin dishes, a few worn books, and a carved wooden box. A rifle rested above the hearth, polished but clearly used. Clara touched the mantel with a kind of reverence. "You built all this?" "I did." She turned slowly, taking in the room. "Where should I put my things?" He scratched his jaw, then pointed toward the smaller room off the main one. "There's a cot in there. You can sleep separate until you decide otherwise." "I appreciate that," she said, voice low. He nodded once, then stepped outside to tend the horses. That night, they ate on the porch beans, flatbread, and dried apples soaked soft with a little sugar. Clara had found a pot in the corner cupboard and boiled water for washing, her sleeves rolled high, her movements quick and precise. She didn't ask for instructions. As the sun slipped behind the ridgeline, Jonah leaned back in his chair, boots crossed at the ankle. "I'll start building another room off the side come August," he said. "Something with more space. If you want a garden, there's good soil east of the well." "I do," she said. "I always wanted one. Tomatoes, maybe. Peas. You'll have them." She looked at him then, long and quiet. "You keep saying things like that." "Like what?" "Like it's already decided. Like you don't doubt me staying." "I don't." She folded her hands in her lap. "I want to be useful here, not just taken in." "You already are," he said. "But if you want it said plain, I didn't bring you here for charity. I brought you because you looked like someone who'd stand beside a man, not behind him." Her throat worked as she swallowed. "I didn't expect to feel steady so soon. Steady's what you build, not what you're handed." A breeze lifted the hem of her skirt. She didn't speak for a while. Then, "I'd like to help mend the fence tomorrow. That west line's leaning near the corner." He gave a short nod. "I'd be glad for it." They sat like that until the stars came out, the kind that looked close enough to touch. Cooper dozed beneath the porch rail, tail twitching in sleep. No words passed between them after that, and none were needed. When she turned in, Clara left the door to her room half open. Just enough. Jonah noticed. In the morning, she was already outside when he came down the steps, sleeves rolled again, hair pinned back, holding a hammer in one hand and a coil of wire in the other. "I figured we'd start early," she said. He stepped beside her, took the other end of the wire, and nodded once. They walked to the fence line as the sun crested the hill and the new day stretched out before them, quiet, open, and waiting. The first storm came 6 days after Clara arrived. It rolled over the hills like a slow-breathing thing, bruised, dark, and heavy, throwing low thunder and gusts that sent the cottonwoods into fits. Jonah had been stringing hog wire along the southern edge of the pasture when the wind changed. He straightened, eyes on the horizon, and called up toward the house. "Clara!" She appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on her skirt. "I hear it." They moved without fuss. He gathered the tools and coiled the wire. She latched the henhouse and covered the washbasin. The wind picked up as they shut the shutters, loose dust curling through the yard like smoke. Inside, the cabin felt close but safe. Clara lit the oil lamp while Jonah checked the latches. Rain hit the roof in thick sheets. "Storms like this common here?" she asked, watching the window pane blur. "Not often, but when they come fast." He hung his coat by the door. "Best to wait it through." She sat at the table, pulling a half-mended shirt from a basket beside her chair. Her needle moved steady even as the thunder cracked. "You ever get caught out in one?" she asked. "Once," he said, setting a tin of nails back on the shelf. "Back when I was hauling timber from the gulch. Mule bucked, and I spent the night under the cart with a broken axle and a soaked bedroll." She winced. "Did you have a fire?" "No dry wood. Just grit and sore bones." He leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "That was the night I decided to build the cabin with stone, not logs. I wanted something that would hold." Her needle stilled. "You think I'll hold?" His jaw shifted slightly before he answered. "You already are." Rain drummed louder like 1,000 small fists on the roof. Neither moved for a time, and when the thunder rolled again, Clara spoke without lifting her eyes. "My mother used to say storms were the world's way of starting over. She'd open the windows when it rained, even if it soaked the curtains. Said clean earth made for clean hearts." Jonah stepped closer, careful not to crowd her. "You miss her?" "Every day." She tied off the thread and set the shirt aside. She would have liked this place. She believed in hard work and quiet men. He gave a short breath of a laugh. "Then I might have passed inspection." "She would have asked you what you read." He raised an eyebrow. "What makes you think I read?" "You keep your books in order." "That's a sign." He went to the shelf and pulled one down. "This one's about soil and water. How to keep land from dying beneath you. I've read it 3 times. She tilted her head. "That's a good sign, too." They stood there, the lamp between them, storm pressing at the walls. Clara reached for the book, fingers brushing his. He didn't pull away. "I'd like to learn," she said. "About keeping land alive. I'll teach you." His voice was low. "If you stay." "I've already stayed." She opened the book, but didn't look down. Her eyes met his, steady despite the flickering light. "Do you want me to stay just because I needed somewhere to go?" she asked. "No," Jonah said. "I want you to stay because this place is better with you in it." Outside, the wind softened. The rain slackened, then stilled altogether, leaving only the hush of soaked earth and dripping eaves. Clara closed the book gently. "Then I think I'll plant those peas." He nodded. "I'll raise the bed for them tomorrow." They didn't touch, but something passed between them all the same. Not a spark, something slower, deeper, like roots growing beneath the surface, unseen but certain. Later, when she lay in bed and listened to the water sliding from the roof, she let her eyes close without fear. And in the next room, Jonah sat with the book still open, the lamp burning low, and a quiet calm settled over him that he hadn't known he'd missed. The last of the ice melted from the creek 2 weeks later, and Clara stood barefoot at its edge, a tin pail in one hand, her hem pinned above her ankles. The morning sun warmed the back of her neck as she dipped the pail and watched the ripples move outward in perfect rings. Behind her, Jonah's axe split wood with a clean rhythm. Each strike echoed across the hollow, steady and sure, like the beat of something dependable. She liked the sound of work being done without complaint, without rush. She poured the water into the cast iron pot hanging over the cook stove and added a fistful of lye soap shavings she'd shaved off herself that morning. The scent of pine and ash rose as the water heated. She stirred it with a wooden spoon, careful not to splash. The stove clinked as it settled. Later, she found Jonah behind the barn, sharpening a spade on a whetstone. His hands were stained from soil and pitch, and his shirt clung damp to his back. There's a lean place in the ground behind the east fence, she said. Too dense for root vegetables. He looked up. I noticed. I was thinking we could run squash near the bottom of the slope instead. The soil's softer there. He nodded, approving. You've got a good eye for the land. I'm learning. He wiped his hands on his trousers and stood. I'd like to ask something of you. Not work. Not yet. Clara crossed her arms, watching his face. All right. There's a dance next Saturday in town. Just a few folks, nothing fussy. If you'd come with me. I'd like that. Her brows lifted. You don't strike me as a man who dances. I'm not, he said. But I'd try for you. She smiled, slow and surprised. Then I'll try too. He reached for her hand, and she let him take it, the touch quiet and warm between them. His thumb brushed the inside of her wrist once, then let go. The morning turned to afternoon, and together they laid out planks for a raised bed near the well, hammering them into place with slow precision. Clara held each board as Jonah drove nails through the ends. When they finished, he stood back, wiping sweat from his brow. We'll plant tomorrow, she said. We will. She didn't step away right away, and he didn't move either. That night after supper, she opened the carved box on the shelf. Inside were 3 folded letters, a silver locket, and a pressed wildflower. Jonah watched her from the doorway. These are from your sister? She asked. He nodded. And my mother. I keep them close. Clara returned the items gently, closing the lid with care. I think you've made this place more than they ever hoped for. They'd have liked you, he said. Even Ma. She was hard to please. I would have liked her too. Jonah crossed the room and stopped a foot from her. I'm not a man who says much without meaning it. I know. I want you here. Not just because you're capable. Not just because I offered. I want you because I've come to count on the sound of your voice first thing in the morning and the way you think before you speak. I want you because you've stitched yourself into every part of this place, and it's better for it. Clara looked up at him, eyes soft and steady. I want to stay, but not just as part of the land. His voice was quiet. As what then? As your wife. He didn't answer with words, just reached out and took both her hands in his and held them like something precious. They married that next Sunday beneath the cottonwoods behind the cabin with the Bensons and a ranch hand from downriver as witnesses. Clara wore a navy skirt and a cream blouse she'd sewn herself that spring. Jonah wore his best coat, brushed clean for the first time in years. No vows were written. They spoke plain and true. When Jonah said, I will never leave you standing alone, Clara's eyes brimmed, but no tears fell. Afterward, they shared blackberry pie with their guests and danced once to a fiddle tune the ranch hand played slow and sweet. Jonah's steps were careful, but Clara never looked away from his face, and he never let her go. That evening, she unpacked her last satchel and folded her old wedding veil into the bottom drawer of the chest beneath her sewing box. She never felt the need to look at it again. Years passed in the rhythm of the land. Seasons turned. They planted squash and beans and rows of sunflowers along the fence. Clara taught a handful of neighbor children letters and numbers in the front room when the schoolteacher wintered elsewhere. Jonah built a shed behind the barn, and in the evenings, they sat on the porch and watched the sky shift from gold to indigo. When their daughter was born one June, with a full head of dark hair and fists like tiny stars, Jonah held her like he'd been waiting all his life for her. Clara named her Eliza, after her mother, and the name fit like it had been waiting too. They never left the land, never needed to. And long after the cottonwoods grew tall enough to shade the entire cabin, long after the apple trees bore more fruit than they could eat, Clara stood beside Jonah on the porch and said, I never thought I'd be this happy. He kissed her hand, slow and sure. You built it, he said. No, she answered, leaning against him. We did. And the wind moved through the trees like a hymn, carrying their quiet joy into the hills where it stayed.